AITA for being mad I paid for my daughter's wedding only to be seated in the back row. I left before the reception and drove straight to the bank. What happened next was quite unexpected. I was finishing up the last bills of the month when my phone rang. I almost let the call go to voicemail. I assumed it was another spam call, maybe a client with a last-minute question, but when I saw her name appear on the screen, everything else in my world faded away. Haley was calling, and I answered on the first ring. What struck me was not her voice. No, at first it was the sound of her crying. That kind of low, broken sob, the same one I had not heard since she was a little girl and scraped her knee in the driveway. But this was not a scraped knee. It was something heavier, denser. Her voice broke as she spat out the words. "Dad, it is over. We have to cancel the wedding. He lost his job. We cannot pay for the venue. We cannot pay for anything." And just like that, I felt the weight of her entire world collapse onto my chest. My first instinct was not to ask questions, was not to analyze the situation and tell her to calm down or let the man she was going to marry sort things out like a man. My first instinct was to fix everything because that is what I have always done since the moment her mother left us when she was barely 2 years old. I was both parents, both hands, both shoulders. I never had the luxury of saying, "Let me think about it." I simply took action. I worked double shifts at the construction site. I missed vacations. I turned down promotions because it would have kept me from picking her up from school and her soccer practices. And at that moment, money did not matter to me. What mattered to me was her scared little voice. And I thought, no, not as long as I can prevent it. I told her to breathe. I told her that dreams are not canceled because of money. I asked her how much was missing to pay, and when she hesitated, I told her not to worry, that I would take care of it. She cried harder, but this time it sounded like relief. "Dad, are you sure?" "It is a lot, a whole lot." I let out a little laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was my Haley. Always afraid to ask for too much, even when she already had my whole heart. "I am sure," I told her. "You are my daughter. I want you to have your day unconditionally. Just a gift from me to you." The truth is that it was a lot. I had some savings put aside, money I planned to use to renovate the kitchen or maybe finally take a vacation. But none of that mattered when I thought of Haley walking down the aisle smiling happily. I pictured the photos, the laughter, the toasts. I imagined she would say to her husband's family, "This is my dad, the man who made all this possible." I imagined a warm hug in the front row, maybe a whispered thank you when the night calmed down. I was not exactly looking for recognition, but I wanted to feel that I mattered, that I was not just the wallet, that I was still her father, not a background character. When we hung up, I stared at the screen for a long time, my hands still on the keyboard, the bills forgotten. A part of me struggled with the decision. I do not have infinite money, but I told myself, she only gets married once, or at least, I hoped so. I wanted her to have her fairy tale. God knows I was never able to give her one in her childhood. Barely improvised Christmases, takeout meals, and hugs when she needed much more. This was my chance to give her something big, something beautiful. And when I walked into the bank the next day and had the final balance transferred, I did not hesitate. I smiled as I signed the papers. I felt proud, as if I was finally winning at this game of being a father after so many years of simply trying to stay afloat. That night, I took out the old photo albums. There is one picture I always come back to. Haley with pigtails, standing on my work boots, wearing one of my plaid shirts as a dress. She had a smile with a gap in her teeth and held a plastic hammer, helping me fix a chair in our small apartment. I remember thinking then, one day I will give her the world. And that promise, that stupid and impossible promise, stayed engraved. Maybe that is why I could not say no, even when I should have set boundaries. Because fathers, like me, do not say no. They just find a way. They sell something, cut expenses, eat tuna for a month. But they are there. Haley wrote to me a few days later, just a simple message. "This is all happening because of you. I love you, Dad." I stared at that message for a long time. I thought about replying something sentimental, but I only sent a thumbs up emoji because that is how I am. I never needed much, just a moment of recognition. And that message for a time was enough. I spent the following weeks avoiding the wedding group chat. I was not interested in talking about flowers, dresses, or the seating chart chaos. I wrongly assumed someone would keep me updated. I did not need to be the center of anything. I just wanted to be present. But I stayed silent. I thought, they know who made this day possible. I do not need to remind them. I had no idea how wrong I was. The day before the wedding, I received a message from her mother just to confirm you will be there at 2 in the afternoon. The ceremony starts at 4 in the afternoon. We already sorted out the seating issue. That was it. No mention of whether I would walk Haley down the aisle, let alone where I would sit. I told myself not to misinterpret it. I told myself it did not matter. But in my gut, a silent fear began to rise and I ignored it as I always did. I put it away and went anyway. Suit pressed, checkbook closed, heart open. I did not know then that I would sit in the back like a distant uncle. I did not know that no one would say my name. I did not know that I would leave before the cake was even cut. But at that moment, the night before the wedding, I still believed I was part of something beautiful. I arrived at the venue early. I always do, whether it is for a job interview, a meeting, or apparently my only daughter's wedding. I parked in the gravel parking lot and sat in the pickup truck a few minutes longer than necessary, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my suit jacket neatly hung on the passenger seat. It was warm for a spring afternoon, enough to make the back of my neck sweat as I looked at the big white barn transformed into a wedding hall. I saw the staff moving inside through the large glass doors, adjusting the chairs, hanging the last-minute lights, and I waited. Not because I did not want to go in, but because I thought someone might come out to greet me. Maybe Haley, maybe even her mother. I thought someone would remember that none of this would have happened without me. When I finally walked in, no one looked at me twice. A woman with a clipboard asked me if I was there for the Andrews wedding and pointed me to the registration table without looking me in the face. I gave my name, and she nodded as if it meant nothing. I waited a moment, a flash of recognition. A Haley said you would come, maybe even a smile, but there was absolutely nothing. I stood there for a full minute watching strangers go back and forth, arranging the centerpieces and filling the ice buckets. I felt like I had shown up at the wrong party, like a ghost wandering into a celebration no one remembered inviting him to. Finally, I found an usher, a boy who looked like he barely finished high school in an oversized tuxedo. I told him I was the father of the bride. He checked his list, puzzled, then nodded and pointed to the third row. "They put you right here," he said, as if that row was not halfway to the exit. I stared at that seat for a long time. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying not to sound abrupt. "I am her dad." The boy blinked. "Yes, I think the front rows are for her mom and her stepfather." And there, I almost asked, "And me, then, what am I?" But I bit my tongue. Instead, I gave him a tight smile and sat down without saying a word. From my seat, I could see the altar, the guests coming in, the photographers preparing their angles, but I could not see her. Her, Haley, my little girl, my reason for everything. I hoped she would poke her head out at some point, give a wave, maybe a smile. Nothing. No message, no call, no mention. The ceremony started on time. The music swelled, and everyone stood up. Then, I saw her, my radiant daughter on the arm of her stepfather, as if they had always been united. He smiled as if he had won the lottery, walking her down the aisle, as if she were his own. I felt my heart tighten in my chest, my mouth dry, my fists clenched on my knees. And yet, I did not stand up. I could not. I just watched him. The officiant welcomed everyone and joked about blended families and modern love. And everyone laughed. He spoke of her mother and her stepfather, of their guidance and support. He thanked the parents, mentioning her mother and her stepfather by name. And me, I was sitting in the third row, a statue made of concrete and regrets. Not a word, not a whisper of recognition. Even though I had paid for this wedding venue, I had covered the caterer, the dress alterations, the floral arrangements, and yet I was a stranger in a suit, someone who did not even deserve a mention. I watched her say her vows. I watched her cry and laugh and take her new husband's hands. I waited until the officiant pronounced them husband and wife for her to turn her gaze to where I was. Just once. A look, a tear, something. But she never did. She kissed him and the crowd erupted. Everyone stood up to applaud and celebrate. I stood up too, not to celebrate, but because I could not bear to be there a second longer. I turned around and walked out while everyone gathered close for pictures. I slipped away through the side like someone who did not belong. The sun was still shining when I reached the parking lot, but everything seemed gray. The laughter echoed behind me, distant and hollow, as I reached my pickup truck and leaned against the door. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just stood there letting it all sink in. The truth, The insult, the deep knowledge that I had given thousands of dollars and years of love only to be erased from her big moment. I had been erased. That was the word that echoed over and over in my head. Erased as if I had never been there, as if I had only been a means to an end. An extra who deserved neither a thank you nor a seat close enough to see the tears on her cheeks. I sat in the pickup truck with the engine off, the windows cracked open, the suit jacket tossed on the passenger seat in a heap. I looked at my phone wondering if she would notice I was gone, wondering if I would get a message, a call, something that would say, "Where are you?" But the screen remained dark. No message, no missed call. Just silence. I watched the beginning of the reception from the distant parking lot. The music, the lights, the dancing. I imagined everyone laughing, toasting with champagne, throwing the bouquet, and I imagined myself inside that room sitting at some random table with strangers while the people I loved acted like I did not exist. That is when I made the decision. Silent, cold, final. I turned the key, drove straight to the bank, and parked out front without even hesitating. I walked in, my tie loosened, my face numb, and I told the teller I wanted to close the joint account I had opened as a wedding gift for them. The one I planned to fill with a good portion of my savings so they could start fresh, buy furniture, pay rent, build something together. She raised an eyebrow, asked if I was sure. I nodded. I am sure. I did not even wait to hear the balance before signing the closing papers. I did not want to know how much I had been willing to give. I only knew that I was not going to give anymore. Not like this. Not to people who looked right through me as if I were made of glass. When I got home that night, I did not bother turning on the lights. I took off my shoes, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat in the dark looking at the picture of Haley and me on the mantel. Her high school graduation. I was wearing the same suit. She was smiling, her arms around my waist, as if I were her whole world. I thought I was, but something had changed and maybe I had allowed it. Maybe I had given so much that she forgot I had limits. Maybe I had taught her that I would always be there, even when it hurt. Well, not anymore. That night, I made a promise to myself, not to punish her, not out of spite, but to reclaim the pieces of myself that I had scattered in her life like breadcrumbs. I had spent 28 years being everything, and in return, I had become invisible. Not anymore. I woke up the next morning with a stiff neck from sleeping in the armchair, still wearing the suit pants. The smell of whiskey hung in the air like a regret I could not shake. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, and I squinted as if it were personal. My body ached, not just from the alcohol or the sleepless night, but from that kind of emotional exhaustion that sets in when you finally stop pretending everything is fine. I dragged myself to the kitchen and started a pot of coffee, watching the dark liquid drip slowly, methodically, like the last remnants of patience leaving my system. I had received no calls or messages, not even an "Are you okay?" from Haley. I suppose I should have known a thank you would not arrive, but the silence still settled in my chest like a stone sinking in wet cement. I sat at the table with my coffee, looking at the envelope I had left there the night before. It was the packet from the bank. Account closure confirmation. Joint account terminated. Inside, there was a copy of the original check I had written to open it along with a printout of the balance. I had not even realized how much I had deposited. $20,000. That was what I intended to give them. A safety net, a head start, furniture, maybe a few months of rent. I had saved that money slowly over the last decade. Small amounts set aside between paying bills, replacing the roof on my house, and giving up trips I never took anyway. I had even considered adding more once they were settled, maybe helping them with a down payment on a house in a few years if all went well. But all of that disappeared the moment I realized that I was not even a footnote in the story they were writing. I ran my fingers over the heel of the check, the ink faded but still legible. My name scribbled at the end like an afterthought. That is what struck me the most. I think it was not the money, not the lack of respect, but the realization that I had trained her myself to expect me to give without limits. I had always been there. I had never asked for credit. But this time, something inside me broke. And once I felt that break, there was no turning back. This was not about revenge or even justice. It was about preserving myself, about looking in the mirror and finally admitting that being the good father had left me empty, unnoticed, and taken for granted. That afternoon, I went up to the spare bedroom, the one I had painted pale pink when Haley was little, the one that still held some of her things in boxes in the closet. I opened one of the dusty containers and pulled out her prom picture, then her college acceptance letter, still in its original envelope. I kept everything, every achievement, every little victory. I had been her biggest fan in the shadows without needing applause. But come on, was it too much to ask to be seen? Praised, not worshipped, just seen. For a moment, I considered packing all this up, taking it to their apartment, and leaving it at the door with a note. Here is everything I kept. Now it is yours. But I did not do it because that would still be me, trying to gently teach her, and I was already tired of being gentle. Instead, I picked up the phone and called my real estate agent. That apartment I rented for Haley, I said in a flat voice, the emotion hidden beneath layers of determination. I need to start the process to end the lease and issue a notice to vacate, whichever is the fastest and most legal. There was a pause on the other end. She knew the story. She had seen Haley with me laughing, hugging me, calling me her rock. Are you sure, David? She asked softly. She is your daughter. I closed my eyes. I did not answer that. She is an adult. She made adult decisions. I am just catching up. I hung up and immediately felt relieved and nauseous. There is no manual on what to do when your child crosses a line you did not even know existed, especially when that line is drawn over decades of love. I went back downstairs, poured myself another coffee, and stood by the window, watching the world carry on as if my collapse did not interest it. I thought about the look on her face when she found out. Surprise, anger, maybe tears. I knew I would be called cold, vindictive. I could already hear her mother's accusing voice. What kind of father does that? The kind who got burned too many times and finally stopped holding out his hands. That night, I received a message not from Haley, but from her husband. Hey, Mr. Reynolds. It sounded like I was just another name in his contact list. Haley said something about a closed account. We were planning to use that money to pay the first month of rent for the new place. There is a mistake. I stared at the message for a long time. I did not reply, not because I lacked the words, but because none would pierce the layer of entitlement and expectation encrusted in that question. A mistake? Yes. The mistake was thinking I would be part of something without truly being included. The mistake was assuming I would always pay and keep quiet. I did not reply that night, nor the next. And when Haley finally called, crying and frantic, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice broke in the message. Dad, please, please, do not do this. We did not mean to hurt you. I did not think. It was not like that. Please just talk to me. I listened to it twice. The first time, I almost called back. The second time, I deleted it. Later, I went back upstairs. I took out that prom picture and sat with it on my lap for a long time. It was a good picture. She looked happy. I looked proud. I remember that night. I had rented a limousine, even though I could not afford it. I had cooked for her because she did not like the caterer's food, and I stayed awake until 3 a.m. just to make sure she got home safely. That night, I felt like a hero, a real father. It was enough. But now, this picture seemed like a relic from a time when my love still had value. I put it back in the box, closed the lid, and turned off the light. The notice to vacate reached them 2 days after the voicemail. I made sure my agent delivered it to them in person, clean, legal, emotionless. Just a folded document with the facts printed in black ink and a deadline highlighted in yellow. 30 days. That was generous, more than the law required in our state. But I assumed it would be enough for them to learn what it feels like to be without support, to improvise, to realize that a foundation is not built alone. I did not warn them. I did not soften the blow because the truth is they did not warn me either when they relegated me to background noise in the most important event of our lives. No one had pulled me aside. No one had told me, hey Dad, just so you know, we are going to put my stepfather in the front row while you silently fund the fairy tale. They just did it. They assumed I would accept it. And when I did not, suddenly, I was the one with the sharp edges. Haley called that same night. She was upset. Dad, what is this? Are you kidding me? She yelled. I could hear her husband in the background pacing back and forth muttering something about legal advice and unfair treatment. But she kept her voice directed straight at me, stinging, desperate, and for the first time in her life, totally powerless. You cannot just kick us out. You gave us this place. You said it was part of your gift. I waited for her to catch her breath. Then I answered calmly. I also gave you 28 years of my life. They did not deserve a mention at your wedding either. A long, deafening silence. The kind of silence that screams the truth louder than any argument. She tried to change direction. I did not want to make you feel excluded. It is just that everything went so fast. Mom handled the seating, and I interrupted her. Enough. Do not put this on your mother. I raised you to speak up when something did not feel right. You had 100 opportunities to say, hey, where is my dad going to sit? Who is going to thank him for paying for all this? And you said nothing. You allowed it. That silence was your choice. Her breathing changed. I could tell she was crying now. That jagged breathing that used to break me when she was little, but now it did not break me because it was not the little girl scraping her knees. It was a grown woman who had chosen convenience over conscience. Please, Dad, she whispered. Can we talk about this? Do not do this. No. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to go back, to give her the softness she was used to. The version of me that absorbed these situations without complaining. But something inside me had changed. A new resolve was born, one that resisted guilt. You made your decision, Haley. Now I am making mine. This is not a punishment, it is a boundary. You are married now, you have a partner. Figure it out like adults. I hung up before she could answer. Then I put my phone on silent and placed it face down on the kitchen table. The following days were quiet, at least from their end. But the silence did not last. Her mother called furious, pouring out the kind of righteous anger that only a former wife can master. You are unbelievable, David. You are punishing her for one bad decision. You always had a savior complex, but this is a new level. I did not let myself get rattled. I told her the truth. I am done being the savior for people who forget I exist as soon as they are comfortable. Let him save her, her new family. She hung up with a curse and a slam of the phone. I did not call her back. Instead, I poured myself a drink and settled into the armchair. The house was quiet, except for the sound of ice cracking in the glass. Then came the wave. My sister sent a message. Then a cousin, a childhood friend of Haley, wrote to me on Facebook saying she was devastated to hear what had happened. The news had spread fast, distorted and retold through the filter of Haley's pain. Suddenly, I was the villain, the cruel father who had pulled the rug out from under his newlywed daughter. They did not know half the story. They did not know about the empty seat, the missing name, how I had stood outside by the wedding barn, watching like a stranger from afar. But no one asked. They just assumed, and maybe that was the final betrayal, how quickly people decided I was cruel instead of wondering how badly I must have been hurt. Only one person came without treating me like a monster. My buddy Jack, a retired fire captain who had seen more broken families than anyone should, stopped by my house with coffee and silence. Two things I did not know I needed until he set them in front of me. We sat on the porch sipping slowly, watching the sky bleed into sunset colors. After a while, he said, "You are not wrong. You know, boundaries hurt when they first happen, like pulling a bad tooth. Everyone complains about the pain, but no one talks about the infection you avoided." I said nothing, but I nodded. He understood, he always had. Then he added, "But brace yourself, old man. When the dust settles, people might not like who you are with a solid spine." That night, I received another message, this time from Haley, just one sentence. "I miss you, but I do not understand you." I read it twice. Then I deleted it because the truth was she did not need to understand me. She needed to understand the cost of taking someone for granted. I was done explaining myself to people who only listened when I stopped giving them things. Let them talk, let them assume, let them invent. I had nothing left to offer except silence. And for the first time, it felt like power. I fell asleep that night, not angry, but at peace. The kind of peace that comes after a storm, when everything is still soaked. But the worst is over. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time in my life, I did not care who crossed it because I was not going to move it again. I went to the apartment the day after they left. I did not announce it to anyone. I did not tell my real estate agent I would drop by. I just wanted to see the place for myself, bare and quiet, exactly as it was before I gave it to them, like a man handing over his last prized possession. The key was still on my keychain, scratched and familiar, and I slipped it into the lock with that muscle memory that comes from months of repairs and carrying furniture to make their transition easier. The door stuck a bit, humidity from the recent rains, but after a little push, it opened with a creak into a room that looked like someone had erased their presence on purpose. They had left nothing behind. Not a glass in the sink, not a towel on the floor, not a note stuck to the counter with an apology or a goodbye. Just emptiness as if they had never been there. I walked in slowly, the sound of my shoes against the hardwood floor echoing like footsteps in a church. The place was strangely clean, too clean. Not the kind of cleanliness that comes from affection, but the kind born of spite. Every corner scrubbed, as if to say we do not need you anymore. I walked into the living room and stood in the spot where I had helped them assemble the couch, sweating under my t-shirt while the man she was going to marry struggled with the instructions. I remembered how Haley had accidentally put one of the armrests on upside down, how she had sat on the floor, with crossed legs, a screwdriver in one hand, and a slice of pizza in the other. At the time, I thought we were building more than furniture. I thought we were building a future together, something shared, something sacred. It turns out I was just setting the stage for my own disappearance. I walked through the apartment room by room without looking for anything specific, just following the shape of what had been. The kitchen still had the spice rack I had bought her for her first college apartment, now fixed to the wall as if it belonged there more than I did. In the bedroom, the walls were bare, but I could see the faint marks where they had hung their pictures. The mattress was gone, but the imprint remained in the carpet like a ghost pressing down, refusing to let me forget. I stood there for a long time, the silence wrapping around me like a second skin. No voices, no laughter, just air and dust, and the faint scent of her shampoo that still lingered in the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, elbows on my knees, and tried to feel something sharp. Anger, regret, even guilt. But what I felt was quieter, sadder, a low hum in my chest telling me that the version of her I had raised was no longer there. Maybe not forever, but for now, yes. What hurt the most was not that she had let someone else take my place. It was that she did not even notice it, that she had stood there smiling while I sat behind strangers on a folding chair, watching my contribution get swallowed whole by the silence. And now, here I was, sitting in the shell of the life I had helped create, realizing too late that I had been the scaffolding, not the structure. I took out my phone and opened my cousin's message once more. The one that said, "You are being too hard. She is young. She made a mistake." I wanted to scream. Too hard. When was the last time someone said she was too careless, too inconsiderate, too ready to leave her father behind like an extra chair? Never once did I ask for repayment. Never once did I ask for praise. But I never thought I would have to beg to be recognized. And that is when I understood how twisted our family dynamic had become. Unintentionally, I had trained her to expect effortless love, unconditional money, a presence without acknowledgement. I gave and she took. And now that I had finally pulled back, everyone acted like the sky had fallen. I walked out of the bathroom and headed back down the hallway, turning on the lights as I went, one by one, until the whole apartment was glowing. Not warm or welcoming, but exposed. Honest. I made a mental list of what needed to be fixed before I could rent it out again. Paint in the living room, a patch in the hallway where something had scraped the wall, a new lock on the front door. The logistics kept me grounded, something to hold on to while the emotional noise in my head rattled like a loose screw. But even as I made plans, I knew what I was really doing was mourning a loss. Not just a daughter, but the version of our bond that once existed, the one that made her call me first when something broke, the one that made her smile when I arrived as if it made all the difference. On my way out, I opened the coat closet and found one last thing. A wire hanger slightly bent at the end. Nothing special, but for some reason, I took it with me. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as a symbol, I did not know yet. I closed the door behind me and slipped the key into my pocket. As I stood on the threshold, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, I thought about what it meant to reclaim a space. Not just the physical, but the emotional too. This apartment had been a gift, an offering, and now it was mine again. Not because I wanted it, but because I needed to prove to myself that I still existed beyond her needs. That night, I took the hanger to the garage and hung it on a hook above my workbench. It looked ridiculous, out of place among the tools and scraps of wood, but I left it there anyway. It felt right, like something broken and ordinary being given a place of honor, just like me. Months passed. The apartment had new tenants, a retired nurse and her son, both kind, quiet, and grateful. From time to time, I would drive by just to make sure everything was fine, and sometimes I would catch the porch light turning on at dusk or hear the sound of a television behind the windows. It was strange to see new lives unfolding in a space that had once held so many of my misplaced hopes. There was no trace of Haley left, no hint of her perfume, no marks on the walls, no laughter echoing behind the door, just a new lease and new names on the mailbox. Yet, every time I parked a little further down the street and looked at that building, I felt something heavy shift inside me. It was not regret, not exactly, but something softer, something that looked like acceptance wrapped in pain. I had not heard from Haley since that voicemail. Not a word, not a text, not a letter, no timid knocks on the door at late hours like I sometimes imagined when she was little and had nightmares. I assumed she had moved on, built a new normal, maybe learned to lean on her husband the same way she used to lean on me. A part of me hoped that was the case. Another part, the ones that still lived in the ache of old memories, hoped it was not so easy. I hoped she at least felt the void. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I wanted to believe that I had been more than a wallet and a backup driver. I wanted to believe that absence had a shape and that mine had left a mark on her life. Sometimes, coming home from work, I would check the mailbox more slowly than necessary, hoping to find something, a card maybe, or a brief note written on the back of a receipt. Anything that would say, "Now I see. I understand." But it never happened. What happened instead was space, a wide, painful space where old routines once lived. I had stopped setting 2 plates on the table, even though I really had not needed to for years. I had stopped pausing in front of the wedding photo she had sent me 6 weeks after the ceremony. Just a generic group photo with her mother and stepfather in the center. I was nowhere to be found. No note, just a glossy image of my erasure. I almost threw it in the trash, but instead, I tucked it away in a drawer I no longer opened. A reminder of how things were, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. I carried on. That is what people do. We adapt. I started taking longer walks. I joined a cycling group on Thursdays after work. I reconnected with my nephew Tyler, who lived 2 towns over and was managing his own relationship issues. Like father and son, we bonded over beers and silence, both of us unlearning the idea that being a man meant carrying pain without showing it. I was not healed, not in a poetic, clean way with neat scars, but I was functional, whole in what truly mattered. And for the first time in a long time, my days were my own. My decisions were no longer reactions to someone else's chaos. I had space to think, to breathe, to have a Sunday morning. I was in the back cleaning the gutters when I saw the car. I did not recognize it at first. It was not the same car she used to drive, but the license plate had her initials, and the way she parked a little crookedly as always told me everything. She did not get out right away. She just sat there in the driveway with the engine running and her hands on the wheel. I froze on the ladder, not knowing what to do. A part of me wanted to climb down and go into the house as if I had not seen her. Another part wanted to march straight to her door, pull it open, and demand, "Why now? What do you want?" But I waited. Finally, she got out of the car. Her hair was shorter. Her face looked tired. She walked slowly, deliberately, like someone approaching a difficult conversation. She did not ring the bell. She just stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the doormat where she used to wipe her muddy sneakers when she was 10 years old. I stayed hidden, watching through the side window, my heart pounding like I was a kid about to get caught. After a long silence, she finally reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. She left it on the bench by the door. She looked toward the front window, maybe wondering if I was watching. Then she turned around, got into her car, and drove away. I did not move for a long time. I just stared at the envelope as if it might explode. When I finally picked it up, I expected an apology or maybe a long explanation about how she had been young and caught up in the moment. But there was no letter inside, just a photograph I had never seen. It was from the wedding, clearly taken by a guest with a phone and not by a professional photographer. It showed Haley still in her dress, standing at the edge of the venue near the parking lot, and me there, walking away from the back with my shoulders tense. It was blurry, poorly lit, but it was unmistakable. On the back, in her handwriting, there were only 6 words. "I saw you, I was wrong." I sat on the porch bench and looked at that picture until the sun dipped behind the trees. I did not cry. I did not run to call her. I did not feel vindicated. What I felt was complicated because those 6 words were not a reset button, were not a magic fix, but it was something, a seed, maybe a beginning. And yet, I did not move. I did not send any messages. I did not open the door to wait for her to come back. Because closure does not always mean reunion. Sometimes, it means standing in the place you once abandoned and deciding you will never abandon it again. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, not even out of love. That night, I put the photo in a drawer next to the wedding invitation I had never framed. I looked at my quiet house, still entirely mine, and realized that peace, true peace, is not loud. It does not arrive with fireworks or applause. It arrives with boundaries that hold, with decisions you do not walk back from, with the understanding that sometimes the only way to heal is to let the silence say what words never could. Comment: I really felt that story hit close to home. Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is finally protect our own peace after giving everything. I've learned that setting clear boundaries is not cruel, but an act of deep self-respect. You never have to keep pouring your heart and resources into places that leave you unseen. It's okay to step back and let people experience the natural consequences of their choices. That space you create often becomes the exact room you need to heal and remember your worth. I hope this encourages you to value the love you give and to quietly expect the same respect in return. Taking responsibility for your own heart is one of the kindest things you will ever do for yourself. If you are walking through something similar right now, please know you are not alone in choosing that quiet strength. Let's keep learning how to hold on to our dignity while still staying open-hearted and kind. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.